So I had an idea. I've often wanted to do book reviews of some kind, but I'm not really the type to do book reviews per se, because I don't really like just trying to straight up evaluate a book in terms of, giving it like a 5-star rating or something like that. And I've often thought that it would be better just to talk about a book and share some quotes from it. So I'm going to try that out today. This is an idea that I've had for a while, which is not to review it, but just to read some of my favorite quotes or things that I have highlighted in a book. So one that we're going to go through today, a little dusty, just pulled it off my shelf, is called The Wisdom of Psychopaths. And this is by Kevin Dutton. So it's called The Wisdom of Psychopaths, What Saints, Spies, and Serial Killers Can Teach Us About Success. So this is a really interesting book. I think a lot of you would be fascinated by this. He does research about psychopaths. And a lot of people have a misconception about psychopaths, that psychopath means that you are crazy, that you are a killer, that you are deranged or something like that. In reality, psychopathy, so the quality of being a psychopath, has more to do with empathy. And a lot of people also make the mistake that psychopaths are incapable of empathy. Not exactly true. What it turns out is that they have a different sort of empathy, where they're able to recognize what somebody else is feeling. They're able to identify that emotion. But it's more of a cold empathy, not like a hot empathy, which is what we would feel as people who don't have, psychopathic tendencies, of actually taking on that emotion and feeling a piece of it. Instead, a psychopath just notices it and can tell what's going on, but doesn't feel it. So it doesn't really affect them in the same way. So there's some really interesting stuff to learn here. And it talks about how, there are a lot of careers that really benefit from being psychopathic, meaning not having that really hot sense of empathy, not being overly concerned with how people feel, being, ruthless to an extent, not ruthless in terms of like you want to kill people, but ruthless in terms of you can be extremely efficient and just completely unconcerned with other things when you're focusing on what you want. So extremely goal-directed and things like that. So for instance, neurosurgeons. There are a lot of neurosurgeons who would qualify as psychopaths. That's actually a good quality for neurosurgeons because you want them to be very unemotional. You want them to be very, ruthlessly detailed when they're holding a scalpel in your brain. Right? There are a lot of other types of professions, other people that do benefit from psychopathic tendencies, such as people in special forces. Again, you want to be able to master yourself, not feel strongly in terms of emotional responses and stuff like that, because that allows you to do what you need to do. So I'm just going to have a look through here and see if there's any quotes that pop out to me that I had highlighted or that I had bookmarked, and I'll just read them for you. I didn't highlight in this book so much. What I had done is just bookmarked or like earmarked the end of the page. So let me take a look here. So this says, their answers, as we shall see a little later in the book, couldn't have been more insightful. CEO, spy, surgeon, politician, the military, they all popped up in the mix, along with serial killer, assassin, and bank robber. Intellectual ability on its own is just an elegant way of finishing second, one successful CEO told me. Remember, they don't call it a greasy pole for nothing. The road to the top is hard, but it's easier to climb if you lever yourself up on others. Easier still if they think it's something that's in it for them. Okay, so this is a part where he's talking about other people's statements that he's gathered about psychopathy. Says the psychopath he observes is an intelligent person characterized by a poverty of emotions, the absence of shame, egocentricity, superficial charm, lack of guilt, lack of anxiety, immunity to punishment, unpredictability, irresponsibility, manipulativeness, and transient interpersonal lifestyle. Pretty much the picture of that 21st century clinicians have of the disorder today. But interspersed in Cleckley, who's the person he's talking about, Cleckley's portrait are the brushstrokes of what looks like genius. The psychopath is described as having shrewdness and agility of mind, as talking entertainingly and possessing extraordinary charm. In a memorable passage, Cleckley describes the innermost workings of the minds of social chameleons, the day-to-day life behind the icy curtain of unfeeling. The psychopath is unfamiliar with the primary facts or data of what may be called personal values and is altogether incapable of understanding such matters. It's impossible for him to take even a slight interest in the tragedy or joy or striving of humanity as presented in serious literature or art. He's indifferent to all these matters in life itself. Beauty and ugliness, except in a very superficial sense, goodness, evil, love, horror, and humor have no actual meaning or power to move him. He is furthermore lacking in the ability to see that others are moved. It is as though he were colorblind, despite his sharp intelligence, to this aspect of human existence. It cannot be explained to him because there is nothing in his orbit of awareness that can bridge the gap with comparison. He can repeat the words and say glibly that he understands, and there is no way for him to realize that he does not understand. And then this is his commentary, the author here. The psychopath, it's been said, gets the words but not the music of emotion. I think that's a really good descriptor there. And, he goes further on in the book to kind of disagree with the statements that I had just read, that it's not quite like that. What this person was describing, I tend to think of more in terms of things on the autism spectrum, of being unable to be moved or unable to feel those emotions. With a psychopath, it seems to be more of they are capable of understanding them, but they just don't feel them in the same way. So, something to think about there. Okay, here's an interesting paragraph. This explains in part why psychopaths are still around, the inexorable perseverance of their dark, immutable gene streams, and why the evolutionary share price in this niche personality consortium has remained stable and buoyant over time. There are positions in society, jobs, and roles to fulfill which, by their competitive, cutthroat, or chillingly coercive natures, require access to office space in precisely the kind of psychological real estate that psychopaths have the keys to, that they have an offer on in their glossy neural portfolios. Given that such roles, predominantly by virtue of their inherent stress and danger, often confer with great wealth, status, and prestige on the individuals who assume them, as Peter Jonasson showed us, bad boys seem to have a certain way with the girls. It's not really surprising that genes have hung about. Biologically, you might say, they punch above their weight. Okay, so this is an interesting one. This is, they were doing some lab work, and they were comparing the author with a friend of his who was in special forces. And basically, they're testing their reaction to imagery. Okay, so... Okay, says Nick, let's get the show on the road. He disappears behind us, leaving Andy and me merrily soaking up the incontinence ad. So that was just, they had an advertisement playing that was like neutral and funny and whatever. Results reveal later that at this point, as we wait for something to happen, our physiological output readings are actually pretty similar. Both my and Andy's pulse rates are significantly higher than our normal resting levels in anticipation of what's to come. But when Nick pulls the lever, or whatever it is that initiates the change of scene, an override switch flips somewhere in Andy's brain, and the ice-cold SAS soldier suddenly swings into action. As vivid, florid images of dismemberment, mutilation, torture, and execution flash up on the screen in front of us, so vivid, in fact, that Andy later confesses to actually being able to smell the blood, a kind of sickly sweet smell that you'll never forget, accompanied not by ambient spa music of before, but blaring sirens and hissing white noise, his physiological readings start slipping into reverse. His pulse rate begins to slow. His GSR begins to drop, and his EEG to quickly and dramatically attenuate. In fact, by the time the show is over, all three of Andy's physiological output measures are pulling below his baseline. Nick has seen nothing like it. It's almost as if he was gearing himself up for the challenge, he says. And then when the challenge eventually presented itself, his brain suddenly responded by injecting liquid nitrogen into his veins, suddenly implemented a blanket neural cull of all surplus feral emotion, suddenly locked down into a hypnotically deep code red of extreme and ruthless focus. I thought that was pretty cool. So that's a few quotes from this book. Hopefully you find it interesting. I'll definitely put a link in the description. It'll be an affiliate link on Amazon, so if you buy the book, I'll get like a few cents from it. Doesn't change the price for you. But it's something that I read several years ago. My recollection of it is, a little here and there, so I think I might need to go through it again and highlight a few things. Like I said, I just earmarked it, but usually I highlight books. But it's a really interesting one, and if you have any interest in sort of the just interesting, weird stuff in psychology that can happen in your brain and in different types of people, this would be a good one for you. It's a great book for a gift for anybody who's a psych major as well. I think they would like it. So check it out. Let me know what you think. And if you have any books that are similar to this, let me know as well.